This is The Girl with the Pearl Earrings by Johannes Vermeer. It's not entirely known who the subject of this painting is. Some believe maybe she's Vermeer's daughter. Maybe she was his mistress. This painting hangs in The Hague, and it's very famous. Vermeer was never really famous while he was alive, and his fame came after his death. But it's known as the Mona Lisa of the North, and it became quite famous. It's very alluring, her gaze, the part of her lips. Diego Velázquez painted this painting in 1650, and this was, during his life, his slave, but he became a famous painter in his own right and painted many famous paintings himself. Many people know this painting by Gilbert Stuart, painted in 1796, of course, of George Washington, and of course, the Mona Lisa. It is said this painting is viewed 10.2 million times a year, and it's one of the most famous paintings in the world. It is said this painting hung in Napoleon's bedroom at one point. And of course, there's a lot of amazing history. So many things have been said about this painting. And part of the reason that I bring these up is because for the longest time, if you wanted paintings, if you wanted likenesses of anyone, particularly portraits, in 15, 16, 1700s, you had drawing rooms, or you had dining rooms, particularly for the rich, and the walls adorned with images of people that you knew, family members. And this is how you remembered people, right? And this is really important until, of course, in 1826, when Joseph Niepce created the first photograph. And this is his first photograph, which he took outside of his bedroom. It's a heliograph, and it was done on a pewter plate, and it took days for this image to process. And you can tell because the light actually changes on the buildings. And it was a very primitive image, and at the time his partner, Louis Daguerre, took the work that he did and he invented what came to be known as the daguerreotype, right? And the daguerreotype became a really important piece of hardware. Now, when the daguerreotype was invented in the mid-1800s, he kind of open sourced the technology to the world, to everyone, of course, except for the English, because the French and the English didn't get along very well. But the daguerreotype is a really amazing piece of technology. Every image that was made by the daguerreotype was a one-off. And it was a very volatile process. But what we were able to do with the daguerreotype back then was really fascinating, because in the mid-1800s, we were able to capture images of people, of course, like Abraham Lincoln, when he was still running for Congress. And the image to the right is of Jesse James when he was 5 years old. And of course, people like Frederick Douglass, and Theodore Roosevelt in his early 20s. And so you take this concept of highly skilled artists that it took to paint portraits like the Mona Lisa or the lady with the pearl earrings, and you start to expand on the ability to create many more images or capture family members and have albums full of your ancestors. But it was still a complicated process. This is potentially the very first selfie taken in 1839 of Robert Cornelius. But even back then, it was a highly skilled process. Photographers in the 1800s had to bring their photo labs with them, and they were able to do amazing things. They could travel and take, during the Civil War and during that time, hundreds, if not thousands, of images and process them in their covered wagons with highly volatile chemicals. But it wasn't even until 1901 that Eastman Kodak brought really photography to the masses with the Brownie camera. And back then it sold for $1, which is equivalent of $33 in 2001. And it came preloaded with 100 negatives in essence. And you'd take 100 pictures and you'd send it to the Eastman factory, and they would return your images to you and reload the camera. It was originally marketed to children, and there were multiple generations of this camera that evolved quite rapidly and was used for many years and took a lot of amazing images and created a lot of history. These types of cameras allowed us to capture images of people like Mark Twain and Pablo Picasso, and of course, many historic figures like Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, Marilyn Monroe, and of course, luminary figures like John Fitzgerald Kennedy. But really, this ability to capture these images started to become something that didn't require the expertise of a portrait painter or even a photographer that had to have all that equipment on a covered wagon, and started to democratize the process. Cameras became an enabling technology, a game-changing technology that helped us to realize that it became more about the content. That's what we really wanted. It wasn't so much about drawing rooms. We just wanted images. We wanted more and more images. And digital photography became something that even enabled us more. In 1975, digital photography was invented, but it wasn't until the 1990s that it became even much more of a reality. In the 2000s, that mobile phones and mobile devices really made digital photography a reality for us. And the transformative technology of mobile phones really changed the game for everyone. And now we've got the power and ability to use a mobile phone to have thousands and thousands of images. So you take that concept, of the Mona Lisa and the skill it takes to do that, and then the people that were traveling and taking images, at great risk to themselves with the chemicals it took to process photos. So what we do, I don't know how many of you traveled on an airplane or in public transportation, but how many people do we see taking selfies of themselves? Not just young people, but everyone, right? Like, this is something that we all do in many cases. To the point where you can't go to a public venue without the mobile phone being a part of the process, being a part of what we want. We want the content. We want, sometimes I'm surprised when I go someplace and people aren't really engaged in what they're there to participate in because they're so, entrapped in their device, trying to capture it and preserve it for themselves. And it comes to the point where our mobile devices, have gigabytes and gigabytes of this content, because that's really what becomes important. It's that content. It's what we're after in many cases, to the point where there have been entire industries that have evolved where now our photo albums are online. They're in the clouds with Instagram and TikTok and Twitter, right? Because that's what we're after. And it's really fascinating that having a smartphone capable of taking pictures at a moment's notice has drastically changed the way that people see the world and the events of the world, both good and bad. Because it's the ability to capture this content, it's the ability to participate and be involved that really matters to us. And it's that transformative technology that has enabled all of us to participate in one way or another. And that's what I want to talk about to a certain degree, because it's happening again, and we all get to participate in it. So that was my introduction to this talk today. My name is Louis Cataldi. I'm the education lead for Quixel. I've been part of EPIC for 8 years. I spent 6 of those years teaching Unreal Engine all over the world. Prior to being a part of EPIC, I spent 7 years in television production. I worked at Blue Sky Studios, making films like Ice Age and Robots. I worked in video games, making my own video games. And I taught college for many years. But I want to talk about other types of technologies that have been massive game changers, similar to photography. Many of you hopefully have seen amazing films like the animated Tarzan by Disney, where you've got these amazing animators like Glenn Keane, and these are some of his animation tests for Tarzan. Once again, highly skilled individuals, frame by frame, drew these images of Tarzan. And that hasn't gone away, right? There's still these wonderful films that are produced, of course, like Toy Story and Frozen, where animators are still hand-keying these wonderful works of art. I was privileged to work with many of them at Blue Sky on films like Ice Age. But that type of art form has evolved, right? There are also films like Planet of the Apes, where the sheer idea of being able to animate this volume of work would be very difficult, if not impossible, to do by hand. Because that many characters animating their bodies, their face, every bit of it could potentially be impossible. So motion capture is used to capture every subtle nuance. And it doesn't devalue the hand keying, it just amplifies it. It amplifies the volume. And so in many ways, like prior to the development of photography, those who wanted to capture images of individuals required a high degree of skill. Photography became an enormous game changer for the overall goal of sharing content. Animation sort of had a similar trajectory. And it's because of the appetite that we have for content that technology has to evolve and change in transformative ways so that we can meet this demand. So what are the next big game-changing technologies? What is going to change the game next? Well, of course, some believe that the metaverse is somehow going to be involved in many game-changing technologies. Though it's unclear, and many of the sessions this week are going to discuss it, it's believed that real-time 3D will be the foundation of the metaverse, and that high-quality 3D content will be part of it in one way or another. And it's suspected that it'll be filled with graphically rich world, teeming with life. Well, that poses significant challenges, right? So that presents many opportunities for us to change the game in another way. But that's really complicated because building worlds is hard, and it's expensive, it's time-consuming. And I know this is a dense slide with lots of words, but the significant amount of content it takes to build 3D worlds usually requires lots of crafting of 3D assets, and those can be very time-consuming. As probably many of you know, quality control tends to be an issue. Reference material tends to be an issue. Objects can be very difficult to source and craft, and so forth. So what does this all mean? How do we solve for these challenges? How do we solve for these equations? Well, I work for a company called Quixel, right? And for the last dozen or so years, Quixel has been helping to prove that photogrammetry is a big part of this game-changing technology, and that Quixel has been helping to solve for the appetite and the hunger of the industry for content. And so, for those of you who are not familiar with Quixel, let me show you a little movie that kind of shows a little bit of the trajectory of what Quixel has been up to. And if you turn the volume up a little bit. So Quixel has become part of Epic, as you could see from this video. And for those of you who are not aware, And Quixel has a massive library of content that we've built and accumulated over the past dozen or so years, and it's growing and building slowly, and it's available to anyone working inside of the engine. And that is something that we continue to build and grow. But the point of this talk, yes, is that it's available, but what we're heading to is your participation in photogrammetry, because like the fact that before it required everyone to go to a dedicated portrait painter or photographer to go and make photographs for you, and then we evolved to the point where we all now have the ability to take thousands and thousands of images. Realistically, we all need to participate if we're going to head to this future that we're working towards, because really content is king. We already see it to a certain degree. Those of you working inside of Unreal Engine hopefully have already jumped in and realized that megascans is already inside of Unreal Engine, and you can drag and drop all this stuff already inside of all your scenes and access, to a certain degree, 16, 17, 18,000 assets. But to a certain degree, we've become an enabling technology. Reality capture has been integrated and an integral part of megascans since its inception. And reality capture is how we process all the content that we scan, right? The process of photogrammetry requires us to take, in some cases, hundreds, if not thousands of images of any particular subject, and that turns it into 3D. And yes, like a portrait painter, that required a significant amount of skill for the longest time, but the delta is shifting. It's becoming a lot easier to do all these things, and the equipment is becoming much more accessible to everyone. And at the end of the day, nobody cares about all that stuff. What we really want is this stuff, just like we want the images, right? And that's the point.
I am the director of the LA lab for Epic Games, and we've recently set up an LED volume for R&D and demonstrations, and generally for the ability to bring the community in and share all of the things that are related to the use of Unreal Engine in virtual production. So one of the first things that we've looked at is the development of content for an LED wall. And something that Megascans has done to help democratize the process is to scan huge numbers of locations and to prep that data for use on stages and accelerate the adoption of this type of production workflow throughout the industry. And I think one of the most valuable things that Quixel has done is to create a library of content that is accessible to anyone who's interested in implementing this in their production workflow. I think when people begin to explore this type of workflow, one of the things that isn't apparent at the beginning is the amount of time and energy and cost that goes into the creation of content. And I think what Megascans has done is to accelerate that and to also make the content available to anyone who wants to use it.
I play that for you because, at the end of the day, we just want to get to work, right? I like to cook. I imagine some of you all like to cook. There are many people that like to go from raw ingredient, right? If you make a lasagna, you want to make your pasta, but you don't want to go out and milk the cow and make the cheese too, right? Some people do. But sometimes you just want to eat some lasagna, right? And so we want to get to the content. We want to get to what we're doing. And so there's different degrees of how much you want to get involved in the process. We've developed a lot of content. We've put a lot of it together. But you can get involved in many places of where you want. Let me share another clip from Eric Ramberg, our content director.
My name is Eric Ramberg. I'm the content director here at Quixel. For any future in the metaverse, it's probably going to revolve around content. And to fill that need and to hit that quality bar, we feel like we need to educate people on how we do it and how they can do it. And in the way technology develops, in the pace technology develops right now, in a couple of years you will have a camera in your phone good enough to scan and create quality on the same level of what megascans is today. So the metaverse will be filled with content that you create for yourself, as opposed to buying it off a marketplace or waiting for someone else to create it or part of some kind of experience. So to be able to fill the metaverse with your content is probably going to be very important if you want to spend time there. I mean, the advantage of traditionally created 3D content is the level of control and, to have procedural control over it. And the advantage of scanning and photogrammetry is the quality. So if you can combine the two, you have the quality of scanning, but you have the control of procedural, that will be the perfect hybrid. And that is definitely how worlds are going to be created in the future. You don't want to scan every single rock of a biome. You want to capture the flavor of the rock and then procedurally detail that environment with that flavor. And that's the direction our content will grow in the future.
So what's, I think, really important to point out is that prior to Quixel joining Epic, no one had really ever seen Quixel scan anything. Our hardware was a highly guarded secret. Our process was a highly guarded secret. But once Quixel became part of Epic, there was no need for it to be a secret anymore. As a matter of fact, it became our mission to share these processes and begin to share this hardware. As a matter of fact, one of my jobs is to teach the world how to do what we do and to prepare this material for public consumption in many ways. So what I'm about to share with you is a trailer to material that is being prepared for public consumption. It's a multi-hour documentary series about how Quixel does what it does. And it's taking us a while because it was begun during quarantine, but it's on its way. Let me share it with you now.
There's a lot of big challenges in making a video game. There always have been, and they've changed over the years, but the issue these days is scale. Being able to produce the amount of content that you require for some of these big games is the ball game.
The goal of Quixel is to scan the world, and our job is to break it down. So we have to scan the things that are the essentials to build the world.
In the early days of experimenting with photogrammetry and scanning, some of the early scenes that we built just blew our minds. We were able to build some of the coolest looking scenes. You're really showing what's in real life, and it looks good. It just works.
Something that Megascans has done to help democratize the process is to scan huge numbers of locations.
We have this amazing rock here, which is super iconic. That would be extremely good to capture, but obviously that would be a very, very tricky asset to scan. So we need to assess, is it possible or not? It looks doable. It really doesn't matter if you have just a simple phone or a really, really advanced camera. The better resolution, the better scan. But essentially, taking a picture is all that matters.
The techniques that Quixel developed in terms of how they scout, plan, break down a shoot into the components, the way they photograph it is like super precise. This company is not just about making a bunch of photogrammetry, it's about a discipline and a passion for making photoreal assets that are at the pinnacle of what you can do in a computer today.
With Quixel, what we're able to do these days is to provide a library of some of this content of the standard that you may not even have the ability to make yourself inside your company. And having all of this stuff available is a game changer. This gives you a capability that you just simply have never had. It's an amazing resource. It's an incredible resource.
For any future in the metaverse, it's probably going to revolve around content. And to fill that need and to hit that quality bar, we need to educate people on how we do it and how they can do it. That will be the perfect hybrid, and that is definitely how worlds are going to be created in the future.
These tools are no longer just for the people who have kind of focused their entire career on this. Everyone is going to be able to do this. And as we start to see Quixel bringing these tools into the market and letting anybody use them anyway, everyone is going to be able to play together to tell a better story.
As we build out this foundational library and as we create the tools that allow just about anyone to build the worlds of their imagination, it's only then it becomes truly accessible to all of humanity.
We're really excited about being able to share this information and this material because it you know, it's been a long time in the making. It's been a long time to be able to share the journeys of these individuals that go out there in, you know, the freezing cold and deep into the woods and take, you know, this equipment out there. But I think the other part of it is because the trajectory, you know, just like I shared at the beginning of this presentation of, you know, taking that covered wagon out there, you know, with volatile chemicals. And then I think as I project in the future, it's not going to require all of that because the game-changing scanning technology is evolving as well. You know, that's not just a model, that's Elvira. Elvira is one of our scanning leads on the Quixel team. And we've been experimenting with being able to scan with a mobile device. And it's coming, right? We've been strapping this really complicated heavy-duty hardware on our backs and, you know, holding it out there, but it's all going to change. It's going to change as the hardware evolves. Realityscan, which you can go downstairs, experiment and test with, is going to help democratize photogrammetry by putting this game-changing technologies in the hands of everyone for free. And I know it seems hard to believe to a certain degree, you know, considering the amount of time and effort we've spent on developing proprietary hardware. But because of our partnership and collaboration with Reality Capture, we've done some tests. Take a look. Maybe you've seen this already on YouTube, but this is just a promotion for Reality. Scanning apps that are available for iOS and Android. But we have taken Realityscan out into the field. I've been testing it. This is a bunch of scans that I've done for myself. And I put them in an actual scene in Unreal Engine 5 with a bunch of megascan assets. And we've actually gone out in the field. This is Elvira, the model that you see, and she's one of our scanning leads. And there she is with a Quixel flash scanner. You can see the size variation. And there she is out there scanning one-to-one assets with a flash scanner and Realityscan. We hope to release this before the end of the year. It's still in heavy-duty testing, and here's what you can see that is actually the output of Realityscan in Unreal Engine 5. What I'm going to show you now is an actual scene put together by one of our lead artists, an assembly of a bunch of Realityscan assets in Unreal Engine 5 with that scene in the background from one of our recent shoots in Sweden. And he just kind of put this together as a test. All of these assets are nanite quality meshes. He used the tools inside of Unreal Engine to massage them and manipulate them, and then built it around an environment around them with existing Megascans assets. So to put Realityscan next to Megascans is can be risky, but they looked amazing. So the future is coming. It's coming in, and part of it is everyone can participate, just like everyone can participate or could participate when the evolution came of the daguerreotype all the way to mobile devices. It took 150 years in the past. I don't think it'll take that long moving forward. And it's already happening. There are already hundreds of people participating. I subscribe to people on Sketchfab who scan every single day. There are people posting free photogrammetry assets every single day on Sketchfab, and libraries are growing by the hundreds of assets that are available for use in any number of projects. So my encouragement is for you all to start opening your awareness if you haven't already. And it's not just world objects. One of the cool things that I did very early on with early alpha and betas of Realityscan is I scanned myself, right? So this is a scan of myself. My wife actually took some pictures because I wanted to test Realityscan with Metahuman, the Mesh to Metahuman creator. And I created a quick Metahuman, and this process took less than an hour to create my version of Mesh to Metahuman using Realityscan. So that's my Metahuman. I got to this point in less than an hour using that scan. Not perfect, but also for less than an hour's work, not terrible either. So this is kind of remarkable that we can do this kind of thing quickly and get to a Mesh to Metahuman.
My name is Miles Perkins, and I am the industry manager for the M&E business unit. I think as we start to have these tools for scanning and digitizing, these tools are no longer just for the people who have kind of focused their entire career on this, but we're starting to see that, you know, with a mobile device or with a set of cameras or things that are handheld and are relatively easy to use, everyone is going to be able to do this, right? Everyone will be able to scan whatever assets or whatever props that are in their proximity. I think that as we start to introduce these, it's going to be a natural part of the set designer. It's going to be a natural part of the art director. There's going to be no difference between actually going to the prop shop and also picking up the virtual prop as well, and that that you'll have both of these that'll be there. I think that we're right now on the precipice of this happening, and as we start to see Quixel and the team there and capturing reality, bringing these tools into the market and letting anybody use them anyway, that really does allow for each one of the different departments to participate.
Miles speaks truth. You've seen him speak. He's the man.
Having been part of Epic for some time now and gaining deep insight into the needs of many different industries, not only games, films, but also architectural visualization, simulation, automotive, product visualization, and well beyond, it's becoming clearer than ever that the demand for digital content is immense. And so it's imperative that we meet that demand and that we truly build a library that is at the scale that meets all of these demands. And this is why it's so incredibly important to open up about how to create content of this level of quality that is required by all of these different verticals, so that we can work together well beyond the capacity of our own relatively small team to capture and process everything that is really needed to create the foundational layer of the metaverse.
I've been sharing the takeaway from my talk today for pretty much the whole time I've been up here. So just to reiterate, though, I think the trajectory that I want to just make sure that you are all aware is that it's not the future, it's the present that I'm talking about, where this technology is coming to the devices in your pocket. It's coming in months in many cases. And really, participation isn't going to require you to become an expert in photogrammetry. I think there's things that you will want to learn, just like making a better lasagna, right? And so I encourage you all to jump in if you are interested in building worlds. It's a good time because realistically, it's not going to take too long of a future before our phones are filled with gigabytes and gigabytes and thousands of things that we've captured around us because we want them in our digital worlds. And it will not require tremendous expertise. We just want to do it. And I think that's the key takeaway that I have.